Snow fell in slow, heavy drifts, muffling the crunch of Elias McGraw's boots as he walked alone beneath a cold, colorless sky. The wind tugged at his coat like a desperate child, sharp with the bite of oncoming night. Ahead, his mule trudged silently, breath rising in ghostly puffs. The saddlebag carried more ghosts than food, a rusted tin cup, a Bible with pages gone soft from rain, and a small, leather-bound journal. Her journal. Elias didn't speak. Words hadn't served him much since Margaret died. She'd always filled the air with music, humming while she cooked, laughing at things he never found funny until after she was gone. Now he traveled west with no real purpose except to keep moving. Staying still was unbearable. Staying still meant remembering. He scanned the tree line. Something had changed in the air. Too still. Too quiet. No birdsong. The forest seemed to hold its breath. He halted. The mule raised its head, ears twitching. There it was. A cry. Thin. Reedy. Barely louder than the wind, but unmistakably human. Elias dropped the mule's reins and moved toward the sound, boots sinking into the snow. His hand found the cold steel of his rifle slung across his shoulder. The terrain dipped into a ravine choked with bare trees and deadfall. The cry came again, closer this time, high-pitched, frantic. Then he saw them, 2 small girls, no older than 6 or 7, huddled together beneath a twisted pine. Their dresses were torn, faces smeared with soot and dried blood, and they were chained, hands bound with rusted iron to the thick trunk of the tree, like animals. Elias blinked. For a moment he wondered if he was hallucinating, another trick of grief and snow and exhaustion, but then one of the girls lifted her head. Her lip trembled. Her eyes, bright, terrified, impossibly blue, met his. They were real. He rushed forward, lowering his rifle, and knelt before them. One girl whimpered and tried to hide behind the other, who only stared with a mix of defiance and pleading in her eyes. Their skin was cold as stone. "Easy now," Elias said, voice low. "I ain't gonna hurt you." He reached into his coat and pulled out his knife. The chains were old but stubborn. He had to wedge the blade beneath the iron clasp and twist, muscles straining. It took 3 attempts before it gave way with a clatter. The smaller girl collapsed into the snow, arms trembling. The other stood shakily. She placed herself between Elias and her sister, as if prepared to fight him off. He set the knife down and raised his hands. "You're safe now." The girl didn't respond. Elias took off his coat and wrapped it around both of them. Their fingers clutched the fabric like lifelines. Then he heard the snap of a branch. His rifle was in his hands before he even turned. The forest was still, but his gut twisted. Someone had left these girls here, and someone might come back. He didn't wait to find out. He scooped the smaller girl into his arms, nodded for the other to follow, and retraced his steps to the Pulley. The girls didn't speak, didn't cry. They simply clung to him, silent as the dead. Elias hoisted them both onto the mule's back and walked beside them as the snow thickened. They needed warmth, shelter. Answers would come later. A few miles east, he remembered passing the shell of an old trapper's cabin, half buried in snow, likely abandoned for a decade. But it was something. With dusk descending and the girls, near frozen, it was their only hope. It took an hour to reach it. The roof sagged in places, but the wall still stood and the fireplace remained intact. Elias kicked the door open and swept through the interior with practiced caution. No signs of recent use. Good. He laid the girls near the hearth, stripping bark from a dry beam for kindling. His hands were numb, but the fire came to life slowly, cracks of warmth pushing back the cold. He pulled a thin blanket from his pack and covered them both. The smaller girl shivered, then curled into her sister's side. Elias poured water from his canteen into a tin cup, warmed it by the fire, and offered it to them. The elder one took it cautiously. She drank, then helped her sister sip. Neither had spoken. When they seemed stable, Elias sat across from them and tried to make sense of what he'd seen. Chained to a tree, Out here, in the middle of nowhere. Why? Who would do such a thing? His mind darted to the worst kinds of men, those he'd encountered during the war, or in the boom towns where law was a rumor. Some trafficked in whiskey, others in flesh. He clenched his fists. He remembered something Margaret used to say. No one gets through this life without carrying someone else's burden for a while. He looked at the girls again. One of them was staring at the flames. The other, her gaze was locked on his satchel. He followed her eyes. Slowly, he reached inside and pulled out Margaret's journal. The girl's face softened, if only a little. Was my wife's, Elias murmured, unsure if they even understood. She used to write down everything, dreams, prayers, how many eggs the hens laid. Even wrote about the stars once. Still no reply, but they listened. I lost her. Not long ago. Fever took her. Took our boy too. That made the older girl blink. Her lips parted, but no words came. He didn't press. They needed time. Trust. He unwrapped a piece of stale bread and handed it over. The girls devoured it silently. Starving, clearly. Outside, the wind moaned. Elias fed the fire and added another log. The warmth spread, filling the tiny space with the crackle of burning wood and the scent of pine sap. Eventually, the smaller girl dozed off. The older one remained awake, eyes still on Elias. Do you have a name? He asked gently. A long pause. Then a whisper. Lila. Her voice was dry as paper. Elias nodded slowly. That your sister? She hesitated, then nodded. Clara. All right, Lila. I'm Elias. She stared at him, then finally let her shoulders drop. A little. I won't let anything happen to you, he said. She didn't respond, but something in her expression shifted, just slightly. Less fear, more curiosity. He kept the fire going through the night, afraid it might be the only thing keeping them alive. Each time he dozed, a noise would jolt him awake. Branches creaking, snow falling from the roof, the distant call of a coyote. He didn't sleep much anymore anyway. When the first light of morning crept through the cracks in the walls, Elias stood and stepped outside. Snow blanketed the earth in pure white silence, but something gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. He circled the cabin, boots crunching in the snow, until he found them. Footprints. Fresh, leading away into the woods, and not his. Elias stood still for a long moment, breath held, rifle ready. Whoever had left those girls out here might still be nearby. But why leave them? Why not just kill them? Why chain them? There was purpose in that cruelty. Elias had seen that kind of purpose before. He'd fought it in the war. He'd seen it wear human faces and call itself law. He returned to the cabin, mind heavy with dread. The girls were still sleeping, curled like kittens beneath the blanket. He watched them for a moment and realized something strange. He didn't feel lost anymore. The road ahead would be hell. He knew that. Whoever had hurt these girls might come looking. The nearest town was days away, and the wilderness didn't forgive the weak. But for the first time in a long while, Elias McGraw had something to protect. He sat beside the fire, loading his rifle with deliberate care, and whispered a quiet promise to Margaret's memory. I couldn't save you, but I can save them. Outside, the wind howled like a wolf mourning its pack. Elias stared into the fire, heart steady. He would not run, not this time. The storm moved in fast. Low clouds, thick and bruised, choked the morning sky as Elias finished securing the cabin's door with a makeshift bar. The tracks outside had vanished under a fresh blanket of snow, but that brought no comfort. Danger didn't leave footprints for long. It lingered in silence, in the prickle on the back of his neck, in the instinct honed by war and loss. Someone had been out there close, maybe watching. Inside, the fire crackled with stubborn warmth, pushing against the cold that pressed in through the cracks. Clara still slept, curled into herself like a wounded animal. Lila sat upright, arms wrapped around her knees, her eyes tracking Elias with a wary intelligence. She hadn't spoken again since giving him their names, but she watched everything. Every move, every breath. Elias crouched by the hearth and poured hot water into a dented tin mug. He dropped in a few crushed pine needles. Poor man's tea, bitter but warming. He offered it to Lila without a word. She hesitated, then took it. No thanks. Just a silent sip and another. Elias didn't expect gratitude. He wasn't looking for it. He took a seat across from her, stretching out his sore legs. His knee ached from the cold, an old wound from Gettysburg that never quite healed right. His eyes drifted to the journal on the floor beside him, then back to the girl. "You want to tell me what happened out there?" he asked softly. Lila's eyes dropped. She shook her head. "I won't push. But I need to know if someone's looking for you." Still nothing. He tried a different approach. "You two got folks? Mama, Pa?" At this, her face flinched, almost imperceptibly. Elias nodded to himself. He'd seen that look before, men who'd come home from battle missing something inside. "The kind of silence grief wraps around your throat. You don't have to tell me now," he said, "but you should know I aim to get you somewhere safe. Can't hole up here forever." Lila's fingers clenched around the cup. After a long moment, she spoke, voice hoarse. "There was a wagon. We were going to Oregon. Mama got sick, they made us get off." Elias felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "Who's they?" She hesitated. "Men. Bad ones. One had a scar here." She touched the side of her face. "He took our things, said he'd come back. But he didn't." Elias leaned back slowly. "So they left you there, chained." She nodded, her eyes fixed on the fire. He exhaled through his nose, jaw tight. He could feel the slow churn of anger in his gut, not the reckless, explosive kind, but the quiet, dangerous kind that stayed with a man. Whoever those men were, they had names, faces, and someday Elias intended to find them. For now, the priority was survival. The wind howled against the cabin, dragging icy air through every seam. Elias checked the woodpile. Enough for 2 more. Nights, maybe 3. After that, they'd need to move. He pulled out a satchel and emptied it on the table. Half a loaf of hard bread, 2 strips of salted meat, a few dried apples. Not enough. Not even close. He'd need to hunt or scavenge despite the storm. He glanced at the girls. Clara was awake now, blinking up at her sister. Lila moved closer and wrapped her arms around her, whispering softly in her ear. The sight made something twist in Elias's chest. He pulled on his coat and took the rifle from the wall. "I'm going out to look for food," he said. "Stay inside. Keep that fire going. If anyone knocks, you don't answer. You understand?" Lila nodded once. He stepped outside into a wall of white. The woods had vanished under the weight of the snowstorm. Visibility was poor, but he knew the terrain well enough to navigate. He followed a deer trail east, toward a creek he remembered from the day before. Rabbits sometimes nested there beneath the brush. It was a fool's errand in this weather, but a necessary one. After an hour of slow, methodical steps, he spotted tracks, fresh. Not animal, human. Smaller than his own, barefoot. Elias crouched, fingers brushing the imprint. The wind hadn't covered them yet, which meant they were recent. He followed them cautiously, heart pounding. The tracks led down a slope and vanished near a fallen tree. Then he saw the figure. A man wrapped in tattered furs, slumped beside the trunk. His face was obscured by a hood, one leg bent at an unnatural angle. Elias raised his rifle and approached. "Don't move," he called out. The man didn't. Elias edged closer, wary, until he was close enough to see the truth. The man was dead. Frozen stiff, eyes glazed, mouth twisted in a grimace. His body was bloated, skin pale. A knife stuck from his side. Not the storm, then. Murder. Elias scanned the area, senses alert. No other footprints nearby. Whoever did this, was either long gone or watching still. He searched the body, found a pouch with flint, a rusted compass, and a folded scrap of paper, a map. Rough, but marked with notations, symbols, a trail leading west, and a name scrawled across the bottom. Silas Elias stood slowly, gaze sweeping the trees. The name sparked something deep in his memory. Old rumors from town of men who trafficked in children and gold. Ghost stories passed from mouth to mouth in saloons. But Elias didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in evil that wore boots and rode horses. He made a note of the location, then turned back toward the cabin. His hands were numb, his thoughts sharper than they'd been in weeks. The girls weren't just unlucky. They were left behind, discarded, maybe not even forgotten. When he returned, the fire was still burning. Lila jumped at the sound of the door, clutching her sister's hand. Clara hid behind her. "It's me," Elias said gently, removing his coat. Snow clung to his beard. "We've got a problem." Lila's eyes narrowed. "Someone's coming?" "Maybe, but not today. Maybe not for days, but we ain't safe here." He sat down and spread the map on the floor. "There's a town west of here, Red Hollow. About 3 days' walk if the weather holds. That's where we're headed." Lila glanced at the map, then back at him. "What if he finds us?" Elias looked her in the eye. "He won't." "How do you know?" He didn't. But what he did know was this. The man who'd left them to die had made a mistake. He hadn't killed them. He'd left witnesses. "I've fought men like him before," Elias said. "I've buried better." Lila didn't speak, but something in her expression shifted. A flicker of belief, faint but real. Clara coughed and tugged at her sister's arm. She looked smaller today, her cheeks hollowed by hunger. Elias pulled the remaining bread from the sack and handed it over. That night he kept watch until dawn. He didn't trust the shadows anymore, or the trees, or the wind. As he sat by the fire, Margaret's journal in his lap, he thought about the things that held a man together. Grief had tried to break him. Solitude had tried to finish the job, but here he was. Not because of strength, but because 2 little girls needed him. He was no hero. He didn't believe in saints, but he believed in promises. He looked down at Margaret's last entry, the one written in shakier, smaller letters. "Don't let pain harden you, love what's left." He closed the journal. They'd leave at first light, and he would carry what was left. Snow crunched beneath Elias's boots, slow and deliberate, as he guided the girls westward through the skeletal forest. The storm had relented, leaving behind a brittle silence. Every sound carried, the snap of a branch underfoot, the distant caw of a crow, the hiss of wind through the pines. Each step they took was a step into deeper wilderness and further from the decaying safety of the cabin. Elias felt it in his bones, the tension, the weight of eyes unseen. Lila walked beside him now. She'd insisted, shaking her head when he offered to carry her. Clara, smaller and weaker, rested in the sling Elias fashioned from an old blanket tied across his back. She barely made a sound. Fever had crept into her during the night, coiling in her chest, taking her voice. Elias had wrapped her tight, rubbing warmth into her limbs when he could, but the cold was relentless. It had no conscience. They followed an old trapping trail, abandoned, overgrown, but still traceable to someone who knew how to read the land. Elias moved with quiet purpose, eyes sweeping constantly for danger. Every few minutes he glanced over at Lila. She didn't speak much, but when she did, it mattered. "You were a soldier?" she asked after an hour of trudging in silence. Elias glanced down at her, surprised. "How'd you guess?" "You look like one," she said. "And you don't scare easy." He smiled faintly. "Fought in the war, Union Army. Mostly Tennessee and Georgia. Got out with both legs, but not much else." Lila didn't reply. She looked ahead, jaw clenched. "You see soldiers before?" he asked. She nodded. "On the trail. Some were good. Most just looked tired." "That sounds about right." They walked another mile before Lila spoke again. "You said you lost. Your wife? Elias gave a small nod. Margaret. She kept me grounded when the world got too loud. And your boy, James. He was 5, smart, loved horses, caught frogs with his bare hands. Lila looked down at her own frostbitten fingers. We used to catch frogs, back in Kansas, before Mama got sick. Her voice cracked, but she didn't cry. Not then. By midday the trees began to thin, opening onto a wide basin. In the center lay a frozen lake, the ice pale blue beneath a dusting of snow. Elias paused at the edge of the clearing, scanning the horizon. A hawk circled high above. To the west, smoke rose faintly between the trees. Lila followed his gaze. A fire? Maybe. Could be a homestead, Elias said. Or something worse. He knelt, gently lowering Clara into the snow, bundled tightly in the blanket. Her face was flushed, her breathing shallow. We've got 2 hours of light left. We can risk it or stay out here another night. Lila didn't hesitate. We go. Elias stared at her. She wasn't just brave. She was decisive. There was steel in her, forged by suffering, but tempered by care. He nodded once. All right. They advanced slowly, staying low as they neared. The tree line. The smoke rose from a small encampment in a gully near the base of a rocky slope. Elias counted 2 figures moving between tents. A third sat by the fire, sharpening a knife. No livestock. No wagons. Just 3 horses tied loosely to a low-hanging branch. Too clean. Too quiet. Elias handed Clara to Lila and slipped ahead. He flanked the camp from the left, circling through the trees until he had a clear view from above. One of the men looked familiar. Broad shoulders, grizzled jaw, a puckered scar on his cheek. Scar. Lila's words echoed in his mind. Scarred man. Took our things. Elias's fingers tightened on his rifle. He watched for 10 minutes, memorizing their movements. The scarred man barked orders. The others obeyed. This wasn't a hunting party. It was a lookout crew. Bandits, no question. And likely not far from whoever they answered to. He eased back through the trees and returned to the girls. Lila stood protectively over Clara, her small body tense like a spring wound tight. You were right, Elias said. He's down there. Lila's eyes didn't waver. What do we do? Elias glanced at the sky. Clouds thickening again. We go around. Long way. Add a day, maybe 2. But we can't risk a fight. Lila shook her head. They'll come. After us, he said he'd come back. I heard him. We're not gonna wait for him to make good on it. They skirted the camp in a wide arc, moving through brambles and icy ravines. Clara's breathing worsened. Elias took turns carrying her in his arms when the sling pulled too hard on her chest. Every hour they stopped to feed her bits of snow, to keep her lips from splitting. She rarely stirred. By nightfall, they found shelter in the wreck of an old coach, overturned and abandoned years ago, now half swallowed by snow and moss. Elias lit a fire inside, cautious to keep the light low, and the smoke buried beneath branches. Lila curled up beside her sister, eyes open and watchful. You should rest, Elias said. I'll watch her, she replied, voice flat. You've been watching her a long time, haven't you? Lila didn't answer. But the truth lay in her silence. Elias sat across from her. He didn't press her with more questions. He simply waited. After a while, Lila spoke again, softly. Mama tried to keep us quiet. After the men came, she said, don't cry, don't make noise. Then one night she just didn't wake up. She wiped her nose with the sleeve of her dress. They buried her near the river. Those men didn't care. They just kept going. One night they said we were too much trouble. Scarman laughed, said maybe someone else would find us. Elias closed his eyes. She wasn't telling a story. She was emptying a wound. I didn't know what to do, Lila whispered. So I stayed with Clara. I tried not to cry. Elias looked at her, really looked. She was a child in name only. War had carved its initials into her face even if she hadn't worn a uniform. He knew that kind of damage. "You did right," he said. "You did everything right." Lila blinked. "Even when I couldn't stop her from getting sick?" "That's not your fault." She was cold. "I couldn't." Her voice broke. Elias moved beside her. He didn't touch her, just sat near enough that she could feel his warmth if she wanted it. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "You hear me?" She nodded slowly, eyes wet but defiant. He stoked the fire one last time before bedding down. Lila lay with her arm draped protectively over Clara, whose breath rasped in the night like a broken whistle. Elias didn't sleep. He listened to every sound, rifle resting across his knees. When the first light of morning crept over the horizon, Clara stirred. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment and her lips parted. "Cold," she whispered. Lila gasped, clutching her. Elias smiled faintly. "Still fighting?" They had to keep moving. Red Hollow was close, 2 days, maybe less if the weather held. But Elias knew the road ahead wouldn't be simple. The men from that camp wouldn't stay put. They had eyes, ears, and ambition. And now, Elias had something they wanted. Witnesses. Living proof of their crimes. He checked his rifle, then knelt beside the girls. "Time to go," he said. "Keep your heads down and your hearts steady." Lila rose, lifting Clara gently, who clung to her like a shadow. They moved on. Together. Through the frost-covered pines and over frozen streams, 3 figures carved a path through the wilderness. Elias at the front, Lila close behind, Clara in, her arms. The trees whispered overhead, warning or blessing. He couldn't tell. But one thing was certain. They weren't just running. They were heading toward something worth reaching. The path narrowed into a rocky draw, the snow thinning beneath the branches of blackened pine. Elias led the way with cautious urgency, eyes scanning each twist in the terrain, every outcrop where danger might wait. Behind him, Lila carried Clara, who was awake but weak, her head resting on her sister's shoulder, small hands clutching at the edge of Lila's coat. The warmth of the morning sun barely touched them. Winter in these parts clung like regret. Red Hollow lay just beyond the ridge. Elias knew the land well enough to feel the shift. He could smell smoke in the air, but not from the campfires of bandits. This was softer, steadier from hearths and chimneys. Civilization, or something close to it. But with each step, the feeling in his chest deepened. The calm was deceptive. They crested the ridge just before midday, crouching low as Elias raised the spyglass he'd scavenged from a Union officer years ago. Below, Red Hollow sprawled along the valley, a haphazard assembly of buildings. Saloon, church, blacksmith, a small cluster of homes, all ringed by dense woods and snow-draped hills. Smoke coiled peacefully from chimneys. A few townsfolk bustled between buildings. It looked safe. It wasn't. Near the southern edge, 3 horses were tied outside a squat wooden structure, too fine for the rest of the town. A man in a thick wool coat stood on the porch smoking, his posture too rigid, eyes always scanning. Elias recognized the stance. Not a settler. A guard. He passed the spyglass to Lila. "Tell me if you see him." She lifted it with steady hands, adjusted the focus and inhaled sharply. "That's him. On the left. Scar on his face." Elias took it back, stomach nodding. "You sure?" She nodded. "He smiled like that before, when he took our things." The timing was no coincidence. These men had arrived first, likely tipped off by one of their own that the girls were missing. Maybe they were stalling in Red Hollow, waiting. Maybe they were setting a trap. They didn't have time for guesses. Elias led the girls back down, the ridge, away from the town's edge, into a thicket near the river. There, hidden among the trees, he dropped his pack and turned to Lila. "There's a barn on the far end of town," he said. Belongs to a man named Emery Graves. Trustworthy. Used to ride with the Rangers. He owes me a favor." Lila stared. At him, brow furrowed. "Then what do we do?" "I get you in that barn. He'll hide you. Keep Clara warm. You stay put. And you?" "I end this." Her mouth pressed into a tight line. "He's dangerous. So am I." Lila didn't look away. "You don't have to do it alone." Elias gave a tired smile. "You remind me of her, you know, Margaret. Not just because you're brave. Because you don't back down even when you should." Lila blinked, fighting tears. "Come back." He crouched, taking Clara gently into his arms. Her breathing had steadied, but her skin still burned with fever. "I'll be back," he said. "But if I'm not by nightfall, you go north. Follow the river. There's a logging camp 2 days from here." He placed Clara in Lila's arms. "Don't wait too long." He turned without another word, rifle slung across his shoulder, knife at his belt. The cold didn't touch him now. Only purpose burned in his blood. Elias entered Red Hollow like a shadow. He moved between buildings, silent and patient, eyes always on the southern building. Scar was still there, leaning on the post, his rifle propped casually beside him. Another man exited the building, taller, lean, with a hawk's gaze. That one wasn't just muscle. He was looking for something or someone. Elias circled behind the building, slipping into the alley between the livery and the old jailhouse. He waited, watched, listened. Just past the hour, Scar stepped off the porch, muttering something to the taller man before heading toward the saloon. Now. Elias moved like a wraith. He crossed the street low and fast, ducking behind a wagon. From there he entered the back door of the building Scar had left, quietly, carefully. Inside, the scent of tobacco and blood thickened the air. This was no home. It was a den. He moved through the hallway until he found the back room. 2 more men sat at a table, counting coins. They didn't see him coming. Elias struck fast, rifle butt into one's jaw, knife to the other's throat. The fight was quick, brutal, silent. Blood hit the wall. Coins scattered across the floor. He stepped over the bodies, searching. There, a ledger. Names, routes, ages, prices, traffickers, not just petty thieves. These men sold people. Elias took the ledger and turned to leave, but the front door slammed open. Footsteps. Voices. Scar was back. Elias ducked into the hallway and slipped through the kitchen, out the back into the alley. He didn't run. He stalked, slow and quiet, until he was behind the church. Then the gunshot rang out. He hit the dirt as splinters burst from the post beside him. "Elias Gray," a voice shouted. "You got something belongs to me." Scar on Elias didn't answer. He rolled, took aim, and fired. The shot clipped the corner of the building, forcing Scar to duck. He sprinted toward the barn. Gunfire cracked behind him. Bullets tore through the snow. One grazed his side, hot and sharp. He didn't stop. The barn door loomed ahead. He slammed it open, breath ragged, blood leaking down his ribs. Lila stood in the shadows, Clara at her side, eyes wide. "Time to go," he gasped. Emery Graves stepped from the loft ladder, rifle in hand. "I'll buy you some time." Elias clapped his shoulder. "Don't die for me." "I won't," Emery said, "but I might die for them." Elias and Lila slipped out the back, disappearing into the trees. The snow covered their tracks within minutes. Behind them, the sound of a rifle cracked. Then another. And another. They didn't look back. They traveled fast. Elias clutching his side, Lila guiding them north along the river. They crossed a frozen log bridge, ducked under branches, and kept going until the smoke from Red Hollow was just a memory. That night, beneath a canopy of stars, they found an old hunting shelter. Elias collapsed near the fire, pressing cloth to his wound. Lila tended to Clara, who now slept soundly, her fever broken. "You're bleeding," Lila said. "I'll live." She shook her head. "You need a doctor. There's one at the camp north of here. We'll reach it by morning." Lila stared into the fire. You didn't have to come back. Yes, I did. Silence stretched between them. Not cold, only quiet. You think they'll come after us again? She asked. Elias looked at the stars. Maybe, but they'll think twice. He handed her the ledger. We give this to the marshal. Burn what's left of their names. She nodded. Clara stirred, murmuring in her sleep. Lila moved to her side, wrapping a blanket around them both. Elias leaned back, pain pulsing but heart lighter than it had been in years. He'd lost much, but something had found him in return. Not redemption, but purpose. In the flickering firelight, he looked at Lila, tired, fierce, loyal beyond measure, and he knew. She would survive. They all would. He closed his eyes, the words of Margaret echoing once more. Don't let pain harden you. Love what's left. He did. He would. And he'd never let go again.